I'm Jimmy with Bentley Ridge Tree Farm. This beautiful weather makes it feel like spring, but it's not. We're not quite there yet. To get into your planting beds, to get flowers in, to get veggies in, none of that stuff is ready quite yet. However, there are several things that you can be doing to take advantage of this beautiful weather. Today we're going to cover a few of these. We're going to look at frost prevention, we're going to look at remulching, we're going to look at pruning, we're also going to look at filling your raised beds. These are all things that can be done early in the season to take advantage of the nice weather before that window of planting takes place. So today we're going to kind of be looking at how to clean up mulch around a tree and put down a fresh layer of mulch. Some of the things I'm going to show you here are not 100% necessary in every situation. Sometimes though it can lead to a cleaner and better look when the new mulch is applied. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this hoe here and I'm going to clean up the mulch that was already pre-existing. We're going to make sure that that's cleaned up so we can put the fresh mulch down. I'll show you an example here because I can already see it in some of this pre-existing mulch that you're going to have clumps and things like that. And that can be a problem in letting water penetrate down into the roots. So it can be a good thing to remove that mulch that's all clumped up from the previous year and add it into the next year. So I'm just going to start by kind of doing a light raking over the top here. And you can see already some of those big clumps that'll kind of get formed from the mulch. That's what we're kind of trying to avoid. That is the reason that I kind of rake up most of my old mulch before I put a fresh layer down, just to help with that water and allowing it to sink into the roots where it appropriately needs to go. So I usually clean up my mulch and put it into muck tubs or some other holding device. And actually we will talk a little bit on this too. When doing like raised beds and other things around your own yard, you can use a compost layer on the bottom of that. So this is kind of that mulch chunk that I was talking about here. I did kind of just want to show you, I got a cup of water here, just show you kind of what that, when it does clump up like that, what happens with the water that kind of pours on there. So if we pour that water on, you notice it all goes to the edges, but my actual hand underneath stays dry, and that's not what we're looking for on the roots of plant material and things. And so that is why remulching can be such a beneficial thing, is because now you can see underneath, I'm still completely dry on that side. The top is wet, but it all kind of goes off the edges of that mulch clump. So that is why we want to continue to break those up. So after we get all that mulch area cleaned up there, we won't need the hoe for anything else here. And then we'll get right into our new fresh mulch. In my case, I like to use hardwood mulch. You can use the dyed mulches, you can use cedar or cypress or any variety of mulch. Personally, I just like the look of hardwood, so that's what I tend to use. We'll go ahead and lay this down here. So you can see with a fresh bag of mulch that there is no clumping in the mulch material itself there. So it definitely makes a nice new layer that water is able to permeate through. My tree's a little bit bigger, so we're going to go ahead and do 3 bags around it. Most new trees would require half a bag or a full bag, but as the trees get larger, you can extend that mulch ring out. Again, it's kind of personal preference. The roots on my tree actually extend significantly further beyond this mulch ring. I just personally like the look of mulch and like the benefit of what mulch does for the plant material itself. So after we get that new mulch laid down there, then we got to spread it out and kind of make it look even. Obviously, you don't want to leave it like this. It's not aesthetically appealing or anything there. Still doing the purpose that mulch needs to do, but we want to make it a little bit more aesthetically appealing. So I'm going to go ahead and move this around here, kind of get it as what, and then I'll also do a quick up on the actual trunk itself here. We'll get a look at that to kind of show you what I'm talking about with the root flare and everything here towards the end. But I'll just work this this mulch around, covering a nice good area around the base of the tree. Again, as you can see here, this mulch is very not clumping, which is definitely what you want to see with new mulch. That's going to allow that water to permeate directly through there and not have any issues. So this is looking pretty good there. Just kind of a nice, what I call the donut pattern around the tree, just to make sure that that middle area can hold water and dissipate moisture down into the roots. And then the outside is nice and textured as well. And as you can tell, I am on a little bit of a slope here. I do add a little bit more mulch to the lower side of the slope than I do the upper side. That's just to help with water retention and not having that mulch kind of flush away with moisture and things like that. And so that's one other thing I like to do with mine. As I talked about earlier, you want to make sure that the root flare of your tree is still exposed. As you can see on my tree here, getting pretty good size. My trunk protector is almost a little too small for it anymore. But you can see that how you start to get that curvature going out towards the ground. That is where the top roots of the tree are going to start and that ground level be. And so yes, you can do a light layer of mulch on that, but you really don't want that area covered up with a lot of mulch, or what we call the volcano, where some people will bring mulch all the way up to the trunk of the tree. That's definitely something you want to avoid on these trees. So look for that root flare, find that root flare, cover it up with just a slight layer of mulch, not much more than that. And then again, that donut pattern is kind of going to be what you're going for with the actual mulch pattern around the tree. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the old mulch material that you take out from the tree from the pre-existing year does break down and turn into compost. Those bigger chunks of mulch will break down and get smaller and make smaller particle sizes. This in turn can work really nicely if you are needing to add compost to, say, the bottom of a raised bed, or a compost layer in the yard or anything like that. Now, you might want to sift it a little bit more if you're putting it in the yard just to avoid some of those bigger chunks, but all in all, you end up with a pretty nice compost mixture there that can be used in other applications. Another thing we can look at doing in the early spring time frame before it's appropriate to plant is filling up our raised beds. As we kind of talked about earlier, some of that material that we got when we were remulching is perfect for using as kind of a base layer. If you are looking to save some cost on raised beds, you can repurpose that and use that as kind of a base layer in your actual raised bed there, which does come in pretty handy. You can see the nice fine fibrous material there. That's really nice to use. However, our favorite thing here is going to be this Coast of Maine raised bed mix. This stuff is incredible for putting into raised beds. We sell it in a 2 cubic foot bag. It's got a lot of fill to it. It's a great product. It's got a lot of different mixes in it with worm castings and biochar. It's great for veggies, flowers, all of the sorts there, and it is completely organic as well. So that is a great product to be using in your raised beds. Something else just to consider when doing a raised bed here: you don't necessarily want to fill that raised bed all the way to the top when you're doing it. You want to make sure that you leave a little bit of space so that when you bring your plants and things into that raised bed, that will kind of help fill that level or provide a level that you could put a layer of mulch or some other covering to prevent weeds and things like that in your raised bed. For the early spring though, just the best thing to be doing, get that base layer down, or just go with a really nice raised bed mix, get that nice and full so that when it does come time to plant, you're ready to roll. Another thing to keep in mind during the early spring is frost and extra cold nights and things like that. When you start to get shrubs that are starting to flush a little bit early, or they're getting buds that are heavy on them, this is definitely something that you want to pay attention to. The main component of frost at night that matters is when you're going to hit 28 degrees for an extended period of time, typically around 5 hours or more. That's when you want to be very conscientious of the temperature. Now, one thing to note when you're looking at the extended forecast or the upcoming temperatures for nights and things is that 28 degrees is typically done on a higher scale. They measure temperature in the air. Your ground temps are typically going to be a little bit colder than what you see the temps on your typical news station or anything like that, just because warm air rises. So those even do have a little bit 2 to 3 degree temperature variant there. So one big component there that you kind of want to pay attention to. So we're going to look at this shrub here today and properly prepare it as if it were going to have a frost here tonight. So a couple things that we want to look at on this are what we want to use for materials and different things there. So first thing we want to look at is these. These are just poles. These are just a sturdy stake is what they're called. We sell them in shop. You could use dowels. You can use about anything. But the reason you want to use these is that when you prepare a frost blanket, you want the frost blanket to be off of the actual foliage of the plant material. So you can put your sturdy stakes in the ground at a teepee or anywhere kind of around them, so that at least the foliage won't be touched by the actual frost blanket itself. So you definitely want to make sure that when you're putting in your poles that it'll make it so it's just a little bit above the canopy so that the actual foliage of the plant doesn't get touched by the frost blanket itself. So we started with a couple of posts here. Now remember, if you're doing like a row in front of your house or a larger section, you will need several different things to keep that propped up away from the foliage itself there. So that's the first component, kind of making that tent or teepee characteristic there. Again, we're using the sturdy stakes to do that. The next thing we want to look at is the different materials that can be used for a frost blanket. Out here at the farm, and you can actually find it some places, is a professional frost blanket. Not 100% necessary, especially when we're kind of getting into the early spring and the temperatures aren't going to be hitting extreme lows. You can use a lot of different things in your typical home as well here. A couple different examples of this would be a typical tarp, a typical blanket. Sheets are very commonly used. Pillowcases are very commonly used as well. These are all good things that can be utilized to kind of cover the canopy of the material from frost. The next thing that we kind of want to look at here is how to apply this, how to put it on. You're going to notice, this is a good example, a lot of your tarps are 8 to 10 foot wide, so they're a big size. If you're just covering one plant, it might be overkill, but it's still fine to do. So you can cover, when you cover this material, you just kind of want it lightly draped over the actual material itself. Again, if you have things that are going to be a little bit more form-fitting to the actual shrub itself, that can be beneficial. We're going to move that blanket. And then the other thing here is you want something heavy on the base. Obviously, you can use anything for that. I just have rocks here today, so we're going to utilize those. And you put a rock on all four sides, or all four angles of where that might be. And you can see, even when we get this on here, that you're going to have those sturdy stakes are the things that are popping out of the top of the tarp there. So this allows the foliage to be covered. You kind of bring these angles out a little ways, so now we kind of have a canopied plant. Everything in there is going to be warmer. The trick to this as well is you want to make sure that when you're doing this, covering up your plant, you want to do it when the sun is still out towards that dusk period there. You want to trap in the warm air that you might have seen earlier in the day from the sun or situation like that, and allow that heat to be trapped underneath of that so that the colder night air doesn't get in there. So that's one big tip. Another tip that we have as well is a 5-gallon bucket or a small bucket of any sort to hold water. If you fill this bucket with warm water and put it underneath of the area as well, during the night, that is going to allow the evaporation to take place on the bucket. That warmer air that's coming off of the bucket will also help insulate the plant material on the inside. Not a necessity by any means, but kind of a cool little trick that you can do to help keep the temperatures a little bit warmer underneath of that cloth as well. The other thing when we're looking at frost prevention, that 28 degrees is kind of that frost period. There are several varieties that are going to be fine down to 20 degrees, down to 15 degrees. It all depends on the type of material that you have. So making sure that you know the plants that are fragile in the spring or do have issues in the spring versus ones that are going to be more durable in the spring is a very important attribute to kind of know as you head into the frost prevention cycle there. So another thing that we kind of like to just say out here with frost prevention, better safe than sorry. So even if you do see 29 degrees or something like that in the forecast, and you've got the ability to do this relatively easily, I would recommend getting out there and doing it on your fragile plant material just to spare them an extra burden in the spring when it actually comes out time for growing. All of us out here at Bentley Ridge are equally excited for the season to get underway. However, hopefully these tips will tide you over until that planting season begins.